I'm the VP of Experiential and Innovation at Vital, where we're based in the Midlands in Coventry. And, I guess we're in the heart of the British automotive industry, and we're primarily concerned with new vehicle mobility proposition manufacturing. So the OEMs come to us and we create the prototypes, the show car models that are used for presentation and evaluation, and that's just like a little snapshot of the work that we do. We also have the one of the largest sort of 3D custom-made 3D printers and lots of little ones. So I guess the question is quite interesting, how the automotive industry is embracing immersive technology. I think it's really, when I think about the question, it's not really a matter of how it's happening right now. The better question is why it's happening right now, and what is the critical sort of critical needs that XR is actually solving. All these sort of collection of technologies that we've sort of heard about, AR, VR, and mixed reality, what are they actually doing, and where are they delivering the most sort of commercial value, I guess. I highly recommend, if you're interested in sort of the automotive angle, to have a little watch of The Pulse by Unreal. It's like a video-based magazine. And it's really kind of, they have one episode where they're exploring sort of virtual cars and the impact of digital IP. And there are people from BMW, Ferrari, and Unreal, of course, talking about how things actually sort of work in real sort of terms. So you can hear it from them. I always like sort of giving the gist of the talk first. The TLDR of it is that AR, VR, and MR are being used absolutely everywhere in automotive by everyone. Everything from the concept design phase to the customer experience to education to the factory floor, technical simulation. If you think about mobility as well, how you use a ride-sharing service, companies like Lyft and Uber are kind of looking at various sort of forms of rich visualization to dramatically change your sort of relationship with the service that they offer, to add a level of certainty to things. Marketers are using it to kind of transform the way a product is being experienced by the customers. And so I thought I'd just give you a very narrow slice, a few very concrete examples, and kind of present my sort of layer of understanding. And it might be useful to look at it from multiple sort of perspectives if you're exploring it. I've been fortunate enough to be involved on the experiential marketing side of things as a consultant and founder, where I learned really a lot of valuable lessons. And sometimes, when you are working on a project, some of the things just get made because they're cool things to do. Brand is seen as aligning with the right things, and some of those things are technologically experimental and advanced. But suddenly things seem very, very different. I don't know if it's the corona effect or anything else, but whereas maybe 4 or 5 years ago, an automotive player said that they were kind of using AR or VR, there was a degree of sort of innovation theatre involved. They just had to align their ducks and say, yes, we're doing that. But with the state of things as things are now, even people who were once sort of toying with the idea of using these sort of emerging and already here technologies are kind of making it very quickly a mature part of their sort of proposition. And if we were to kind of peer into our sort of binoculars as opposed to gaze into a crystal ball, and look at it through the lens of human behaviour, not just the technology, I think it will allow us to see a lot further. And when we're staring at nascent technology, it's easy to think that a lot of this magic is of the now, but of course it's not. And this appreciation, the human appreciation of why it works, is what I'm kind of interested in, because it kind of transcends the technology side of things. So I'm going to take you to 1948 and tell you about an X-ray car. It's very lo-fi by today's standards of, I guess, how models are made. It involved black perspex and very bright lights, and it was the first. Well, I mean, it was the London Motor Show, the first sort of show after the war. And to put it again in a human context, that we'll all, I guess, appreciate, chocolate was rationed at the time, and there were still sort of new car launches happening. So a company called Hillman, they came out with this. And I'm going to just show you the clip, and hopefully I don't have any sound issues here because you'll just get it through the microphone.
Once again, Britain's cars go on show at Earl's Court to tantalise us with their newness as we roll along in our pre-war flivvers, waiting for the day when a Jaguar might be ours. Or do we want a Triumph Mayflower for good value in a cheaper car? Here's the world's first X-ray model anyway, a Hillman Minx. You can see at a glance just what makes the wheels go round. If you've come with a housing...
Right, I'll stop it there. As you saw in the clip, this ingenious little contraption was really about showing you something that you can't obviously see if you're kind of viewing it from that particular angle. And I think you can distill, it might seem very simplistic, but you can distill a lot of the work in this area down to this very simple sort of fact. We're effectively responding to a very human experiential need and curiosity, and the way you see the internal structure of the car tells you something that you wouldn't have otherwise sort of known. And the way that works is basically bright lights are shone from inside the car, and it kind of permeates the perspex and you can see it. And the context, although it's marketing, it's really interesting to juxtapose that visual with what we have today. So bear that in mind. And in today's during Corona world, we have things like this, which more than ever we need to find new. Right now, we need to find new ways to collaborate and do physical tasks. And just look at the kind of imagery, the kind of the designer as the sort of magician or orchestra conductor who can see all these different sort of components. This is effectively a version of that which you just saw. And of course, I'm being a bit facetious here. This is a highly stylized marketing image by Kia, as are some of the others that I'll show you as well. But in my opinion, it does hint at the reality where the bulk of the commercial value of embedding XR in automotive is being derived from. So, as you can see, this is a designer who is doing something, or a key decision maker. It's in a factory-like environment. And I think these images are quite, telling, really. So it's all about the pre-roll stuff that gets you from a sketch to being on the road. And I think what Vital do exceptionally well is all the things that you need to do before you sort of reach that sort of phase of kind of car being sort of roadworthy. And the design sort of effort that we sort of expend is across some of these sort of areas. And this entire process, although we've learned how to condense it very to a great degree, this process used to take years, and it still takes several months from start to finish. That's my understanding of it, but it's happening much, much faster. And I think the amazing opportunities lie in places where you can shortcut some of these sort of processes. And just to kind of come back to the couple of uses on the design side, I decided to hit up sort of Ford and see what they do. They have something like 190,000 sort of employees, all involved in various functions. These are huge companies that we're talking about. And as I was looking at what they're doing in the early to mid design phase, which is what I'm doing in this presentation, I came across this, which is a piece of marketing that they put out where they're talking about sketching cars using off-the-shelf VR components. And there's a lot of really interesting things to sort of unpack here. It's a big deal because whether or not you believe that they're using sort of VR in the sort of concept phase, suddenly you're in the realm of, I guess, democratizing design and kind of really showing it, this kind of jittery sort of thing moving around in the space. This is a GIF playing, that's why it's jittery. But what I mean is the whole sort of idea of a car in a space, is not as regimented as what we're used to seeing, the whole sort of 2D sort of aspect of sketches and drawings and the master sort of Frank Stevenson sort of designer kind of looking at stuff. And I think this also hints at kind of shortening the loops. They're kind of skipping some of the 3D creation process by going from 2D directly to 3D, and this sort of real-time sort of higher fidelity digital model at the onset means that they can involve key decision makers from different departments in a very efficient way to spot issues earlier on, and be able to feed back into that design process. And I think that's really interesting, rather than sort of have these sort of gated stages. They still exist, but I think there's a lot more sort of crossover and bleed happening. And the other thing is, like, if you think about Unity and Unreal and how they're effectively primarily concerned with the consumer sort of products proposition, they're now sort of using those same products and the same learnings and the same sort of ergonomic factors for enterprise use as well. And in Ford's case, I think genuinely, I think it's really interesting that they highlighted Gravity Sketch, because, you know, I have Gravity Sketch, I've played with it. It means that I don't need to learn how to use Alias to be able to perhaps sort of dabble in this sort of area. And I think this is also kind of, you know, hints at a lot of various sort of facets of this. And even though I've not been at Vital for long, I've personally been in design reviews where we use VR in a product called VRED by Autodesk. So it's definitely not a novelty. We're really sort of actually using things. And just to take a step back pre this sort of design phase, it's worth bearing in mind, as Sol sort of mentioned, that we're in the fourth sort of industrial revolution. So, you know, you've got all the scene of ongoing automation in traditional manufacturing and practices that necessitates we do things very precisely and collaboratively with machines. So in the design of those sort of factories, BMW are one of those sort of companies that are using VR to kind of design their production facilities and reconfigure them around the fact that humans are sort of coexisting in spaces with machines. I think I just want to give you a little bit more in terms of, you know, numbers that I wasn't certainly familiar with before sort of doing this presentation. The curious thing to bear in mind is that it really isn't just human. You know, you have humans and robots. So SEAT, Spanish sort of company owned by VW, they have 12,000 sort of employees and 2,000 robots. You know, that's a ratio of 1 to 6. So for every 6 people, there is 1 robot. And that's really, I mean, I know it's a bit of a generalization there, but it's an example of a smaller company within a larger group. And when I was trying to kind of look at what they're doing, they say that they're using it in virtual prototyping. Both design and engineering teams better simulate prototypes in terms of volume and size and get a more detailed sort of view of how the different sort of parts fit together. And they've got case studies like every other sort of manufacturer about how they're using VR, and those case studies are dated back a good few years. So it's not a new thing. It's not a Corona sort of thing that's happening. And so again, Sol mentioned this in his sort of presentation. There's a lot of overlap there, but I'm going to mention other things about this. So VW a few years ago said that they were, I think it was 2 years ago, they said that they wanted to, their ambition was to, across their sort of sub-brands, they were wanting to introduce 10,000 sort of employees and train them using VR technology. And I think if you think about this, training is of course very expensive, but to do it in a way that consistently scales, I think that's the real magic here. You know, they can, again, you saw sort of Simon's sort of presentation, you know, doing tours of venues, and the idea that you can sort of have different sort of tours for different age groups and audience sort of profiles. You could also have the same for different learning styles within Automotive, for example, and you know, you can repeat those very consistently. So I think, again, it's really interesting to see all of these, and there's lots of video evidence of this actually happening, and lots of stats to accompany it as well. And yes, it's very scalable, and they see the biggest benefit of part of this training as the idea of being able to expose sort of their employees very safely to as many different training experiences as possible, and now in their own time, you know, just ship out a VR headset but see how they perform, you know, see what they look at. When I guess when I was learning to drive, I had a driving instructor who you know, could very easily see where my eyes were looking, and I think this is something that technology does very easily these days, you know, just with very basic sort of attention tracking. 90% of the sketches that SEAT are using are now viable. You know, if you think about, you know, 500 or 600 improvements before a car is built, they are massively reducing their production time during the prototyping phase by around 30%, according to themselves. And one of the companies, again, my colleague, one of the directors of Vital, Andy, who started his career at Toyota, one of the companies that absolutely epitomizes this perfection, and now that I've heard from Andy, it kind of all tallies up. As part of their management and production sort of philosophy, they use VR sort of technologies as in one way in the validation process. So the task of inspecting and coating the thickness of a car normally involves two employees sort of meticulously cutting small pieces of paper and placing them on specific points in the car for measurement. And it's normally long and tedious, and it can average take an entire sort of day to do. That's a Prius there, and I think the gentleman who's wearing the HoloLens there is managing to do that in a couple of hours. So the other thing that is obviously happening is that a lot of consultancies are looking into this space, and they're now reporting on things that have happened. And one of the reports that I found by Capgemini is that they really do have compounding effects. So if a company has 5 or more use cases for VR, AR, and MR within their sort of production phase, their overall efficiency can rise to 57% versus those sort of companies that aren't sort of doing much but are sort of implementing other non-sort of experiential improvements. That's quite an interesting sort of concept, but it brings me on to my provocation that everything that you see that I've presented really is about doing things faster and cheaper. What about the expressive angle? How do the tools that we use change the way we actually see things and the way we make things? If you can believe that kind of VR is a good way to visualize design and engineering issues and ideas for easy decision making, what do you do with that extra time that's being sort of generated? Again, coming from like a marketing and experiential background, an understanding of play is very beneficial here. And I think the kind of opportunity is massively great for people who are from kind of outside of this area to kind of have input in there as well. So when you condense all that sort of process, you suddenly have all this extra time that can be used for insights to kind of percolate, but also to make mistakes, to lead to new discoveries. Sometimes when we're pressured to do something, we don't have the time to kind of experiment. And I think this is where these technologies absolutely come into their own. If you imagine a very basic sketching process, you wouldn't draw a line if you knew that line isn't easily reversible. And I think that's something to sort of bear in mind. It's all still about very human factors. So I would urge anyone sort of exploring the space to kind of look at it from a different sort of perspective of sort of optimization. Just look at it in terms of curiosity and exploration. What does this bit do? What does it look like if we do this? Within this sort of new medium, there are new sort of forms of expression, as we've seen from the other sort of presentations. I think that's what a lot of technology enables us to do. It just expands that possibility space, and the technology palette allows us to express new things differently. In this talk, I haven't even touched on sort of, and I don't think there's going to be time to kind of touch on any marketing and experiential. There's so many examples that you can just try right now. And, for a company like, Maserati or Ferrari, it really is crucial. Ferrari can't make multiple versions of the car for sampling purposes, but they can create virtual sort of properties that allow you to sort of change parameters, customize the car, personalize it before you get to drive it. And so, it's even more important now that we sort of see the benefit of those things, but also kind of realize what else we can sort of do. If you think about the in-car experience also becoming richer as we have these sort of devices that have LiDAR on them, heads-up displays. Is it always about utility? If your car sort of drives you, what kind of entertainment can the driver sort of derive? How can the reality sort of be changed and shaped to make the kind of journey experience a bit richer and more interesting? And I think the encouraging things that I'm seeing as well immediately when kind of you see a light bulb moment is when Unreal announced that they're bringing their technology to the sort of interfaces that we have in cars to HMIs. So they're bringing far more power to these sort of displays. And as I guess as our lens into the digital and immersive environment becomes more accessible as well, it's also worth bearing in mind another facet of all of this, which is this technology right now is a bit like a blindfold. The tech is definitely clunky. It's better than it's ever been. It's untethered. It allows you to do so much and has so much power. But if you ever test any of your applications, you'll know about the fatigue aspect. It's really, it's quite, it can get painful actually. So I think it's going to dramatically change and continue to transform. And I'm also going to say that we should really have an eye on the past as well. There's a fantastic phrase from Marshall McLuhan that augmentation leads to amputation. And there's a fantastic, really, really good book that I would highly recommend you get out of the library or sort of try and buy on eBay. It's called Virtual Reality by Howard Rheingold. I've had it for 20 years. The book itself is 30 years. But in this book, he was talking about sort of projecting reality onto sort of your retina and things like teledildonics and just, some really crazy stuff. I think if anyone's kind of thinking about sort of venturing into this area, absolutely embrace that sort of unknown aspect of it. There are no code versions and environments, things like Reality Composer by Apple that allow you to very quickly prototype things that in 2017 were really difficult to do. You'd have to download plugins, you'd have to get Unity rolling, you'd have to do all sorts. So we're actually working with a number of our clients, including Geely Group, and doing design investigations, really just exploring, playing in this sort of area, and looking forward to doing more with the likes of Arrival and actually stepping outside of the automotive sort of sphere as well and doing things with adjacent industries. So thank you very much. I hope that you've enjoyed that, and please do sort of contact me if you are interested in working with us and doing some interesting design investigations. Over to you, Jim.
That was great. Thank you very much. Fascinating. If you want to stop sharing your screen,
I will do.
you should see us both there. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. The phrase I love, the little Hillman minx, whatever it was, tantalized with newness. That's what you need to you need to nick that phrase, Shay.
It's today, isn't it?
We need it. We need to be tantalized with newness. I think that's what's been happening this afternoon, to be honest, Shay. It's been fantastic. The one thing I was going to ask actually was, again, shameless plug for Production Park and the companies on Production Park. So Brilliant Stages, one of the biggest kind of corporate contracts they've worked on over the years is for car shows. It's for the Detroit Motor Show for Chrysler, and a huge basically stand build project that was done here and shipped across to the US for display. So where do you think, just to quickly ask you a question, and I hope you can hang around for the Q&A at the end, which Sol is going to kind of chair for us. But where do you think it'll go in terms of the amount of money that's spent, and also the kind of carbon footprint of those kind of trade shows, those global trade shows, which is huge? Where do you see Immersive playing a role in that market?
I think it's going to be absolutely instrumental. So everything that I've sort of presented so far presents a very narrow slice of what you do before you get to a car show, effectively. I think if you consider how many examples there are right now of virtual production companies who are using examples of cars with backgrounds around them, similar to a lot of the Mandalorian stuff that we sort of looked at. Previously you had, dumb LED walls behind you. Now they become much richer stages. The AR aspect, whereas previously confined to a very narrow and small sort of viewport, suddenly becomes much larger, suddenly becomes more magic. I think, if anything, Experiential will be sort of more at home, on your sort of driveway, in your garage. You can sort of have one model of Kia and it would show you very quickly what you would have if you were to go for an upgrade and lease the next model. As we go to alternative sort of ownership models of cars, this is going to become even more sort of salient. So I think there's that to kind of contend with. The car shows are still going to happen, but I think there's going to be a period of sort of augmentation where there are aspects of those sort of experiences that you get to see at home, because the majority of people don't get to go to the car shows. They read about them in sort of magazines, and they watch sort of trailer clips online. There's a lot of content that falls off the back of that, and there's a lot of Instagram influencer and TikTok influencer content that is car related that sort of falls off the back of those sort of car shows. But ultimately I think it's going to become more diversified, and then it may even replace it altogether. I wouldn't be surprised if it would just be an inevitability that car shows are going to disappear, and there'll be a lot more virtual properties being created.